So to be completely honest, Dexter Original Sin is one of the best spin-offs I've seen in a while, in terms of keeping to the continuity and genuinely adding on to the main show rather than taking away from it. This prequel, while not perfect, definitely succeeds in doing that. Going into it, I was pretty hesitant considering the fact that I didn't enjoy the previous spin-off from 2021. This second spin-off was announced on February 6th, 2023, just 1 year after Dexter New Blood finished airing on Showtime. Originally, it was assumed that production would begin later that year. However, due to the writers and actors strikes of late 2023, the spin-off was postponed to late 2024 instead, with production slated to begin in mid-2024. Soon after the spin-off's announcement, Michael C. Hall was announced to be returning to voice Dexter's inner monologue, a choice I really think is needed for the show to feel as authentic as it does. The show follows a 20-year-old Dexter Morgan. Having recently graduated college, Dexter gets an internship at Miami Metro Homicide in the forensics department as a cover for his newly acquired hobby of killing criminals. While the main show basically follows that exact same premise down to the formats of the episodes, this spin-off is still such a fresh and unique take on this character in my personal opinion. In the main show, audiences saw glimpses into the past of Dexter Morgan, and even though they are great for the character, I never personally cared for those flashbacks because I never saw the resemblance between young Dexter and old Dexter. So I'm definitely glad that we're getting a sort of redo here in this prequel, even though it may not be some people's cup of tea. Normally, I'd be really against milking a show like this down to the bones. However, as a massive fan of the show, I'm low-key gagged by how good this spin-off truly is. From the writing to the visuals and the casting in particular, it's all done incredibly well. Again, please understand that everything I say in this video is 100% my opinion, and I'm probably in the minority here, but I genuinely liked this spin-off a lot more than I'd say the average person. Currently, I'm recording this after having watched the 9th episode, and I will be posting this the day of the finale, so maybe the finale is completely horrible and I'll have to take back everything I say in this video, but so far I've genuinely enjoyed a lot of this spin-off. And I honestly could not say the same about Dexter New Blood, which, if you didn't know, explored Dexter's new life as a now reformed killer in upstate New York. There was something so alien about that show that made me genuinely upset for most of it. From its visuals being oddly ugly, to the fact that 90% of the cast were new to the show, to the horrible ending where Dexter literally dies, it genuinely felt like such a departure from the main series, and a huge misstep from a storytelling standpoint. So imagine my surprise when I watched Dexter Original Sin and felt the complete opposite way about it. Dexter Original Sin almost entirely recaptures the pacing of the original. Unlike New Blood, which was long and kind of boring, and a really slow burn in my opinion, in this spin-off the characters are all recast, and whoever did the casting needs a raise because they are recast to perfection. Along with the main timeline of the show, which mostly takes place in 1991, there are a number of flashbacks in every episode which take place in the early 70s, right around the time that Dexter's mother was a CI for Harry. We learn many things during these flashbacks, like the fact that Harry and Doris once had a child together before Dexter and Deborah, who Harry accidentally let drown in their pool. We are also given more context into how Laura Moser died when she was involved with the cartel, as well as what happened to baby Brian directly afterwards. Overall, I am happy that they decided to include these flashbacks. However, I feel like a lot of them were filler towards the middle because I don't particularly think we needed that much context on Laura and Harry's relationship, but maybe that's just me. Dexter Original Sin is such a great extension of the original show. The writing in particular is actually what really surprised me the most. While it never actually reaches the heights of the original, it's still for the most part written extremely well, again, for a spin-off. The big issue with prequels and recasts is sometimes the characters fail to come across as the same people across portrayals. Take a franchise like The Terminator, for example. Each version of John Connor feels like a completely different person because all of the movies have different writers, directors, and actors. Dexter and Original Sin share the same showrunner, so there was little risk of that happening here. The character is adapted from the book series, but both television adaptations feel aligned with each other, and that's something to applaud, because it's not easy to take a character that's beloved by so many, that's had such a long and storied history on television, and attempt to write a prequel based around that character with a completely new cast. While Dexter Original Sin is not perfect by any means, I genuinely find it hard to complain about. I had a really fun time with it. First off, the dialogue feels so incredibly rich and full of references to the main show. This is good because I personally had a hard time with the dialogue and plot of Dexter New Blood. I got the sense that they wanted to take what they had presented with Dexter and sort of twist it to where these two shows could be seen as contemporaries rather than a fully streamlined and connected universe like Original Sin goes for. The original show and New Blood may follow the same character, but they are meant to be completely different takes on that character. I'll talk more about that in the visuals section of this video, but Original Sin truly feels like it exists in the same universe as Dexter, just 15 years prior. I think it's because of the amount of characters that we got reintroduced to. Basically everybody from Dexter Season 1 shows back up in this spin-off, which again, I have to applaud the writers for. Even if it's a bit fan servicey, I definitely enjoyed getting to see my favorite characters this time in a new light. New Blood, on the other hand, had a basically completely new cast, and it was just really difficult to get to know any of them because it was a limited series. Dexter Original Sin follows the exact same plot structure as Dexter, which also contributes to the similarities between shows. In my opinion, Dexter New Blood kind of felt like a movie with one central theme or conflict. Original Sin follows in the main series' footsteps by using the Monster of the Week format to show how Dexter got his start in murder. It truly feels like a season 0.5 of the main show. The timeline of this season was really well thought out as well, although there are some discrepancies, such as Dexter's age not being consistent, them completely fumbling what Dexter's first crime scene was supposed to be, as in the original show it's stated that his first crime scene was a married couple found dead in their house, and here in Original Sin, it is a solo bludgeoning outside of a bar. Aside from little things like that, most of Original Sin's writing is genuinely pretty consistent, which I appreciate as a continuity freak. Another highlight of this show is Patrick Gibson's stunning performance. Like, he was such a believable Dexter. I didn't quite see it at first, but as we got into the third or fourth episodes, I really didn't question it anymore. Sometimes I would catch myself questioning some of Gibson's choices, but then I'd sit there and think, actually, you know what, it kind of does make sense that he is portraying a much more lighthearted version of the character because Dexter hasn't been through, like, the shit at this point. I don't think he'd be able to go out there and be as goofy with his performance if this prequel was set even 5 years before the main show. It just makes so much more sense for him to be a much more goofy and lighthearted version of Dexter, as it is set 15 years prior to the original series. He's basically still a kid, after all. To embed all of those layers into the DNA of an already existing character is challenging, and I genuinely think that Gibson, along with the writers, did it masterfully. Gibson's cadence and overall body language reminds me so much of Michael C. Hall, which speaks to Gibson's dedication to nailing the role. Again, at the beginning he felt a bit green, but as time went on, I certainly felt like I was just watching the main show again, which brought back so many memories, making this a very enjoyable viewing experience. The NHI plot involving Brian Moser was actually a really welcome surprise in my opinion. I truly did not expect them to bring Brian into this show, and when it was finally revealed that he could possibly be the NHI killer, I legitimately stood up from my seat in shock. The twist involving Spencer was just okay in my opinion. I was never that attached to him in the beginning of the series, so while I was definitely in shock, I wasn't necessarily gagged by the twist. Like, if they had spent a little bit more time developing his character rather than just portraying him as like a stock police captain, I probably would have been a little bit more gagged, but that's just me. His motivations were also slightly weak. I mean, the husband going crazy after the wife divorces him is a trope that's been used countless times, so I wasn't necessarily on board with that aspect of it, but the fact that he was the surprise villain was nice, I suppose. Outside of Patrick Gibson, this cast is so good, you guys. I already know some people are going to disagree with me, but genuinely, whoever did the casting deserves a gold star. Literally 99% of them bring their A game here in terms of acting ability, but also their take on the previous character is all done really well. Right away, I was immediately taken aback by how good Molly Brown is as Deborah. I just see so much of Jennifer Carpenter in her. The cursing, the sassiness, the energy, and the mannerisms are all so Deborah, but again, in a much younger light. She is, after all, 17 in this spinoff. Deb is definitely my favorite character from the main show, so I gotta admit I was extremely hesitant going in, but right away, I was immediately impressed by Brown's ability to capture Deborah's personality perfectly. One thing I can say about Deb, though, is that I'm not sure I like her storyline all that much. Like, getting with another potentially dangerous guy after we already saw that in season 1 with Rudy is a bit redundant. However, it is stated in the main show that Deb had a long, rocky list of relationships in the aftermath of Harry's death, and we know that that point is somewhere around a year after this point in the show, so it's not exactly out of character for Deb, but it is a bit redundant since we saw that in Dexter season 1. I almost wish they would have made this spinoff take place when Deb was beginning her career as a cop, but you never know, they might make this an ongoing series and the story might eventually evolve towards that moment. Other standouts include Christina Milian as Maria LaGuerta and James Martinez as Angel Batista. Both of them really did their homework as well. James Martinez nails David Zayas' quirky lisp and overall vibe. I mean, the walk, the outfits, it's perfect. Like, you cannot tell me this isn't the same human being. It took me a bit longer to get behind Christina Milian, but once I saw Maria in there, it was so noticeable how good she was in the role. The thing I don't necessarily like about LaGuerta's character from a writing standpoint is that they constantly portray her as this power-hungry, like, sleeps her way to the top kind of character, and it is consistent with the main show, but I really thought that they were going to dial that back a little bit because it's a bit, you know, like misogynistic, and I never really liked how they chose to end her arc in the show anyway. So I was really hoping that they would try and do justice to her character because she was one of my favorites in the first 5 seasons before they completely forgot about her. In this spinoff, she's just as focused as Maria is in the main show, but I gotta say she's a little bit too cold, not as nice as LaGuerta came to be in the main show. Other castings that are spot on but have little to do with the plot are Alex Shimizu as Vince Masuka and Sarah Kinsey as Camilla, the records desk lady. Both of them are just the spitting images of their previous versions. Alex Shimizu is so good as Vince, you guys don't understand. His little giggle down to the cadence is perfect. Camilla really stood out to me as well. The southern accent and her charm is what made her one of my favorite side characters in the original show, and I'm just so happy that there was so much care put into all of these characters, no matter how big or small they were in terms of importance. The one cast member I don't think resembles the previous version is Christian Slater as Harry. I mean, what happened here? Like, I love me some Christian Slater, and he's doing a great job here, but genuinely, I don't feel like he pulled Harry off that well. I saw glimpses of Harry in there, but ultimately throughout the show, I kept having to remind myself that that's who he was, which is not a good thing. I didn't have this issue with any of the other main characters, so I don't know. As much as Christian Slater didn't work for me as Harry, I really did love his chemistry with Patrick Gibson and Molly Brown as the Morgan family. They came across as a believable family. I liked getting to see the evolution of Harry and Dexter's relationship in a new way, since I never cared for the flashbacks in the main show. Truly getting to see Harry's emotions as his son was actively learning to become a better serial killer was such a ride. From trying to suppress it to allowing it as a way to save himself from dying, to outright forcing Dexter into career paths that involve seeing dead bodies, and finally to his acceptance that this code he's made for Dexter might actually justify some of Dexter's actions. It's an evolution that is strongly explained in the main show, so I don't think we necessarily needed to see it all the way here in this spinoff, but it is nice to see nonetheless because we didn't actually get to see Harry's emotions throughout this whole process. less. As far as the new castmates go, Sarah Michelle Gellar, Patrick Dempsey, and Reno Wilson all give decent performances, but I gotta admit, as newcomers to the canon, it was harder to connect to their characters as a result, because I didn't already have a pre-existing history with them. With that being said, those are three huge stars in television, and not one of them feels like they were just tacked on to the cast for the name recognition alone. Patrick Dempsey as the twist villain works, but I was sort of expecting a little bit more from him. Sarah Michelle Gellar is always an amazing actress in basically everything she does, but I am interested to know why they only build her as a recurring character rather than a starring one. I know she's in the forensics department, but Masuka is credited as a main, so why isn't Tanya? Reno Wilson is listed as a main character, and while I did enjoy his involvement in the story, I just feel like they needed to give him more to do because he was always just like background cop number 3 in the main timeline of the show. I did love his performance in the flashbacks a lot more because he was actually treated importantly, being close to the Laura Moser case with Harry. Speaking of which, I would love to talk about Laura Allen, who gives us such a deep and layered look into Laura Moser's last few months. And I gotta hand it to her for making all of those flashbacks worthwhile. Even though there wasn't much to go off of with Laura, Allen completely transformed into the role. So again, whoever found all of these actors and brought them all together deserves a raise. The cinematography of Original Sin is genuinely pretty good. While it never really compares to the main show, Dexter's kills in particular are extremely well executed. There are tons of callbacks to the visuals of the original show in this one. Unlike New Blood, which was absolutely not interested in sharing any visual similarity to the original. The main cinematographers from the original show, Romeo Tyrone and Jeffrey Jur, who led seasons 1 to 6 and 7 to 8 respectively, each sat this spin-off out. Although Edward Pay, a cinematographer with over 70 titles to his name, took over, and I must say he does a great job of capturing the feeling of the original series. I've been a bit vocal about how the previous spin-off from 2021 was a bit of a letdown for me visually, but this one almost kind of makes up for that one. For example, in New Blood, everything is extremely desaturated and gray looking, and I have famously been known to despise this overexposed and undersaturated look, though I guess it kind of does make sense for the type of show that New Blood was, as it's meant to be a darker, more modern take on the character, not to mention the fact that it takes place in a snow-covered climate, so the desaturated look wasn't as offensive as it would have been if they were still in Miami. In other words, the cold, desolate, uninteresting color palettes made sense for New Blood, but it still felt very alien compared to the visuals of the original show, which was hyper-saturated almost to a fault. Original Sin is also a tad undersaturated compared to the main show, but it isn't as noticeable, at least in my opinion, as it is in New Blood. The lighting is actually 100 times better in some scenes though. Like, most of New Blood looks desaturated and overexposed, and Original Sin at least gets one of those things right with the dynamic lighting. This is what is missing from New Blood. New Blood honestly looked like some basic generic streaming show in my opinion, and I think that's why I felt such a disconnect to it as a series, because it didn't look like the original whatsoever. Take a look at these 3 separate scenes and compare how the lighting, cinematography, and coloring evolved across all 3 shows.
Look. No. Yes. It's horrible, isn't it? Isn't it? Open your eyes and look at what you did! Look, or I'll cut your eyelids right off your face. It took me a long time to get these little boys clean. One of them had been in the ground so long he was falling apart. I pulled him out in bits and pieces. Grace the Lord. Stop! That never helped anybody. Fuck, dude! Don't bother struggling. I'm no Eagle Scout, but I do know my knots. What are you doing? Let's talk about what you did. You mean the deer? He didn't do anything wrong. He didn't deserve that. Not as bad as that was, it's not the worst thing you've done.
You're fucking crazy, man.
Arguably, but not the point.
Then what is? Tell me what you did!
Or I'll fucking kill you.
You're just gonna fucking execute me or some shit like that?
Wouldn't be the first time.
You think you can get away with that?
Again, not the first time.
You're a serial killer?
I was. Let me help you with that. Scream again and lose a tongue.
That was the first time I ever felt someone else's fear.
The first scene from the pilot of Dexter is lit in such a horrifying way. The film grain gives this scene a vintage but also gritty look. Because Dexter is particularly brooding in this scene, the cinematography and lighting should reflect that. In New Blood, the shots always look extremely gray and overexposed at the same time, leading to a loss of true contrast. This isn't a problem that only Dexter faces, as most shows look like this now, because Hollywood has just lost the ability to make anything look good these days, but it's particularly annoying to me to see it here when most of Dexter looks like this. Original Sin is a bit of an improvement on New Blood, but I gotta say, watching it on different devices is a complete nightmare because on my TV it looks like this, and on my phone it looks like this. Either way, my point is that the visuals have improved from New Blood, so I guess that's a plus. Overall, I'm extremely excited for the finale of Dexter Original Sin. I really hope they stick the landing because I've really enjoyed the first 9 episodes. I also wouldn't mind getting another season or 2 of this spinoff because this one was really great. Also, in case you weren't aware, I am currently hard at work on a Dexter retrospective series that should be uploaded within the next month or 2, so if you enjoyed this video and you'd like to see more Dexter content in the very near future, consider subscribing and turning on the notifications to stay notified for new uploads. That Dexter retrospective is going to be a deep look into all of the characters, story arcs, and timeline of the main show, so trust me, you will not want to miss out on it. Anyway, I hope you guys all have a lovely day, and thank you so much for watching.